Okay. Let the record reflect that Corey Ellenson is not here tonight, but the rest of us are. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I need a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
Second.
Okay, it was moved by Dr. Fernando and seconded by Mrs. Reuter. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passed, it has been adopted. Welcome, everybody. It's all nice to see everybody out in the audience. We'll move on. Okay, comments from the members of the Board of Education.
Oh, what?
Yeah, that's it, because I didn't say that, but there are no public comments. Well, Miss Jeanette wants to say something. Do you want to say anything? No, I didn't. So. Okay.
No cards and nobody in the audience but Jeanette.
It's been a long time. Okay. Mrs. Reuter, do you have something to say?
I guess I just want to, now that school's out, I really want to encourage all of our staff to do their very best to take the time that they deserve to spend with their families and loved ones to recharge their batteries and have an enjoyable summer. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Fernando? Ms. Board?
Make sure my microphone is on. To piggyback on Mrs. Reuter's comments, I would like to remind us all that while some of our staff, district employees are enjoying some time off right now, many district employees are working hard and working harder to get the district sites and classrooms ready for August. Our maintenance on facilities, on the grounds, processing and delivering orders to each and every site so that they have what they need to start the school year, painting, washing and waxing floors, cleaning carpets, moving furniture, again, the grounds itself, you know, the fields, the grass areas, all the maintenance that goes on routinely has to be done anyways on top of all of the other extra duties. All to get ready for before the day of school starting, but the day when teachers come back to work, because teachers like to get into their classrooms for a while before they welcome their students back. So they are definitely working on a hard deadline for that, for the beginning of school. Thanks and much appreciation to all the classified staff. That's it.
Thank you. And I don't have anything to say either. So we will move on to staff presentations, and I believe Dr. Kelson's going to talk to us about the Universal Preschool Plan. I'm pretty excited about this.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent De Leon, Cabinet colleagues, Mrs. Cornelius, Mrs. Walzak, and Evan Turunen. Thank you all for being here this evening. I'd like to tell you briefly about what I see as a positive development for student learners in the state of California, and specifically in Glendora Unified School District. The state has recently directed districts to see to it that there are more opportunities for students in early childhood education. This evening, I am going to talk with you a little bit about universal pre-kindergarten, which includes some changes in the existing transitional kindergarten program, as well as expanded opportunities in our preschool. So the state has acknowledged, and this is actually in the written guidelines that they've provided, that children who have effective early childhood learning experiences and opportunities will have an advantage in school and in life, especially when they have what has been called in the research adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are part of some public health research that has been led by California's first Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and others who basically point out that a child will generally bounce back from most difficulties or be resilient. However, it is harder for a child to do that when they have experienced early trauma. So the idea behind the law and the direction we've received is that if students are in school, they are gaining more protective factors against the trauma that they may have experienced, especially over the past 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think there's been a greater awareness as a result of that. Glendora Unified has had the Tiny Tartans preschool and daycare program for a long time. The mission of that program is to see to it that children have high quality, developmentally appropriate, and meaningful learning experiences, and that they are learning in a safe and supportive, active environment. And I am certain that you have seen when you have been to visit that program that is true. We also run an extended day daycare program as part of Tiny Tartans, and that serves students all the way up through middle school. So what are we working on right now with this universal pre-K plan? We're looking to expand and respond to the funding that will be coming to provide universal preschool that makes an additional year of school beyond transitional kindergarten and even kindergarten, which are currently offered in the state of California, available. Glendora will phase that in as facilities funding allows, while also remaining compliant with the law. We will be expanding the access that families have to our extended day programs, and later we might be talking about the expanded learning opportunities plan that is a part of that. We will be providing earlier enrollment opportunities in a phased manner in our transitional kindergarten, and as a result, our working families especially will be receiving extra support because of the opportunities provided for all children. So this year we are extending the deadline or the birth date by which students must be 5 in order to participate in our transitional kindergarten program. So this year it will be through February 2nd, next school year 23-24, if they are 5 on or before April 2nd, and in the third year out, if students will be 5 on or before June 2nd. So we have been working with our transitional kindergarten teachers to talk about how to do that well, because what this means for them, as they explain it, is the younger group of children joining their class can be markedly different than the developmentally, right, than the students they are currently serving. So we will be taking the state's guidelines of a phased approach and also working with the teacher team to make sure that our curriculum articulates from our preschool through our transitional kindergarten on into kinder 1, 2, and all the way up. We're also working with the facilities team, with our site principals, with Michelle Gallo, our director of this program, to see to it that we are compliant with all guidelines and also really enriching our students' lives with this phenomenal opportunity to increase our early childhood education programs. That is a brief overview of the universal pre-K, which includes preschool, transitional kindergarten, and greater awareness across the state that kindergarten is available. Thank you for that. What comments or questions might you have?
Mrs. Reuter?
Yes, thank you. This is exciting. This is an opportunity for Glendora Unified in a lot of different ways to expand our circle of students and all that will mean for us. Do we have any sort of projection numbers? You know, if we're going to be pushing back already this year, what's the current date for a 5-year-old?
So we had been working with a December birthday.
Okay.
And if a family called and they were close to it and space were available at one of our school sites, then we relied on the principal and the TK teacher to work as a team to evaluate that child's readiness.
Okay, so we're really only talking about 2 months for this first year.
Correct.
Meaning that we shouldn't receive any sort of a rush as far as facilities space is concerned.
Yes, and I have some data to back that up. We initially predicted that we would in fact have a rush because there are between 175 and 250 children in each year of birth who could be served in our programs. However, throughout the spring, as we were collecting interest from people who called, when our cabinet looked at how we might serve families who had expressed interest in our current program, we have currently the capacity to serve everyone who had expressed an interest. So we had under 30 children who were interested and who met the legal requirements, and we had spaces to serve them this year.
A total of 30.
Yes, 30 additional.
And is that across 5 sites at this time?
We were almost full at a couple of sites and very low enrolled at one.
Okay.
So most of the families who had expressed interest will enroll in that low enrolled site.
Okay.
And then as in a fair order, we were able to fill the other classes accordingly as well.
Okay, so moving forward, as we really expand the program, I appreciate trying to balance things out here, so not any one school is over. But moving forward, will they sort of fall along the same lines as the traditional elementary boundaries?
Good question. I'd like to answer that possibly, and here's why. There are 2 highly influential factors in early childhood education that are beyond those of a normal K-12 system. They are the codes that a preschool program, not necessarily transitional kindergarten, but it relates in a moment, I'll explain, that they must follow. And a lot of those guidelines around licensing are very specific in terms of facilities. Mm-hmm. So when we think about bathrooms, it's difficult for our littlest humans to access the standard size elementary facility. Mm-hmm. So as our team is planning, we're looking at how to meet the needs of all of the families we serve while also remaining compliant with the codes and facilities requirements. Since our team began studying this, I remember becoming highly engaged with it around October, November. The expectations of this state shifted in the early spring. They shifted again in mid-spring, and we anticipate not necessarily changes to building codes. Those are generally slower to change, but also potentially some changes for the expectations in the area of expectations of staff. Mm-hmm. So we have, last I heard, 100,000 open jobs in preschools around the country. And part of the burden there has to do with who has the number of units and the training required in order to serve this population. So you have, all that said, to sum it up, a combination of we must comply with the facilities guidelines. We will do our best to serve every family in a way that is convenient and very student-centered. And then third, we have to look at staffing and available space kind of all together. Details to follow.
And as it stands with what we're sort of projecting, do we have the facilities dollars that we need to be able to get started with what we need to do?
Great question. We've padded a little extra money inside of our budget to be able to help us in the event that we don't have that, so that we can begin the work. So in our new structure budget for our multi-year projection, we've actually added some funds in there specifically for preschool, for both facilities as well as for people, which might include some training, not knowing exactly when the dollars are going to come for us. in our district, based on our current standards compared to other school districts that might have higher needs to be able to implement this. So they've got different phases, and it's going to be based on your supplemental and your concentration as well. I anticipate that we may not see some funds based on the current guidelines until a few years out. But I can't wait a few years out to be able to help implement that. So we have set aside some monies. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to kind of get us started so that we can begin implementation and be able to help support the work of teaching and learning.
Mrs., I just have a question, Mrs. Vicar. We have some schools that have the small toilets.
We do, and so some of it might be a shift. One of the things that they've told us is that they may allow now for kindergarten not to have some of the requirements where they have to have it right there inside their facility. So as they start to navigate and kind of change some of those rules, and we've heard some different stories and different things. You probably have heard those things at your workshops through CSBA. It's kind of changing a little bit with the landscape because as they start to hear from districts about we don't have this, they're actually kind of looking at it. So we're paying very close attention to it. Mrs. Walzak and myself have been at trainings as well as Nancy, and we're looking at how we can structure things. Tommy's also looking at how we can leverage some other resources to be able to do that. We're shifting some resources to use some ESSER funds to help us with some other things so that we can free up monies to be able to put it here and start making some investments. So we've done a little bit of changes to be able to help that landscape with us so that we can at least begin the work and do it with some fidelity for planning. So it's great to be able to partner with teaching and learning on this.
I do have something to add on that too. So we do have some ability for some flexibility in this district. Do we have all the tiny toilets we will eventually need where we need them? Probably not. We will need to get that money from the state at a certain point. I have been made aware that we do have a school that has an entire wing where every single classroom has its own restrooms and its own tiny toilets. So if worse came to worse and it comes to the deadline to implement, we could add classrooms at that particular site with the understanding that when they go to kindergarten, they go off to their address site, wherever that might be. So that is one thing. We do have one site that has an entire wing, which is unusual. The rest of the schools maybe have 1 or 2 classrooms total with the tiny toilets in them. So that's one issue. And then I also wanted to add some good news. I did get an email today from the California Department of Education, and they have partnered with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and they will be presenting a brand new credentialing program for TK, which reduces the requirements, because currently TK teachers are considered kindergarten teachers and they get a regular multiple subject K-12 credential. They're going to be presenting a brand new credential for TK, which incorporates some of the PK pieces and more of the early education and maybe less of the other requirements to make it more viable for more educators, because we have a lot of people, if you think about it, if you're shifting enrollment from preschools into K-12 schools, those preschool teachers it would be ideal if they could shift with the population, but they would not have the correct credentials. And so seeing that the state and the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing is very aware of that and is planning to present a new credential is really good for us, because that gives those pre-K teachers the opportunity to shift where the need is. And so those are 2 really great things on the horizon for PK. So we're happy.
Great, thank you. Are you finished, Mrs. Reuter?
I'll let a few other people go.
Okay.
I've got other questions, but I think they'll probably get answered, and I'll share the.
Share the question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. Dr. Fernando?
To quote, state policies shifted. That's such a surprise.
Shocking.
I'm just so shocked that happened. So I want to go back to it's gone. The first
we can
slide.
put it back up. Tracy, can you have Evan put the? Yes.
And the reason why I wanted to bring that up for the potentially 3 people that might be watching this on a Wednesday afternoon, there may be more, who knows. But I just don't think that sometimes we fully communicate the rationale for why something like this policy, and then this adding on this to our school district potentially is a benefit to families. So can you talk more expansively, based on what you know? What happens to a child, even if they're not from adverse childhood, even if they haven't experienced adverse childhood experiences, right? What does preschool give? What does pre-K give a child that does not go to preschool or pre-K not have?
And
Right.
can I, before you do that, can
Sure.
Pre-K, TK, kindergarten. So are we doing 3, 4, 4, 5, 5-year-olds here, 5, 6-year-olds? So
Pre-K, so it's not.
I'm
The,
just trying to get the numbers
yes,
rather than the
yes, and TK will be first.
And is this mandatory to parents like kindergarten is? Is it you must enroll your child?
No, not
Or
at this time.
Actually, kindergarten is not
So it's
mandatory.
offered, it is not required.
Okay, and now you take his.
Thank you.
I just wanted to kind
Sure.
of put that in their minds as you're.
I appreciate the help very much. So, Dr. Fernando, to answer your question, I'll start with the benefit for students, and
Yep.
then there's another really important part of this work that is for all members of the family. So the average child, when entering school, may or may not know their alphabet. They may or may not know how to count to 10. They may or may not know how to write their name. Or even, I'm hearing from some of our summer school teachers, we have kiddos who are just figuring out, because of many families kept their kindergartners home. 2 school years ago, we have kids who are figuring out the relationship between their first and their last name. Which one is which? What does that mean? That's not all of the children, adding some weeks to their first grade year, but there are some kids who are working to bounce back. So for a child who has the academic skill needs that I just explained to you, they must also, depending on their, and all of these are generalizations, right? Parents are our children's first teachers, and I like to say they're best teachers. However, we do have kids who may or may not have had anyone at home beyond their immediate family to interact with. So simultaneously, the expectation of learning the academic skills, counting, maybe running in place, or as one of our principals was explaining, he doesn't know how to skip. So his kindergartner had to learn how to skip at school this year, all of the gross motor coordination. And then there's also a part about social skill development, how to play well in the proverbial sandbox. The more opportunities students have to gain that learning prior to starting the mandatory schooling years of first grade, we sort of taken kindergarten as a given. However, it is not a mandate because of old laws that have remained on the books. So it benefits children to have those opportunities to interact with others, to have additional adults around them who care about them and are guiding their learning. And I would say that part of why this policy change is so important is current stats indicate that only 13% of working families in the state of California have a preschool where they can send their children. That could be because of proximity to a location. That could be because of how priceless yet expensive these opportunities are.
Yeah.
And there are some staffing challenges that we face too.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no,
It's-
and I think the thing that the public needs to be aware of is that the growth of preschools happened actually because of poor kids. So the one federal program in this country that has been very successful is Head Start. Head Start was designed for poor children. So if you are from a wealthy family benefiting from this, it is not because of wealth that this has been shown to be affected. It has been shown through Head Start because they've tracked Head Start kids that started in the 60s and now, are retired, obviously, and the different outcomes that Head Start kids had compared to kids that did not go to Head Start. And that shifted our perspective of pre-K and preschool. So just to educate the public that it's because of lower income families that we have better understandings of how to educate our kids as opposed to private preschools. But I really agree with you that a lot of working families do not have access to this because the costs are prohibitive. Even here in the local area, I have seen some of the costs to go to a private preschool, and it is out of most families' range.
Yes.
And we're seeing that as well as we think about the increased free and reduced lunch demographic that we have in our district. And so I'm excited about this because this is another measure of response to that changing demographic. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Borden?
Again, I'm piggybacking on what Dr. Fernando said. Along with this, will they, as in TK, when that was brought around, you had to mirror the kindergarten program. Do you think they're going to do the same thing with pre-K as well? It'll be the same hours for pre-K as TK and kindergarten? Which, what I'm getting at is daycare. Because parents are only going to be able to send their kids to school for those hours, and then they'll still need daycare. So,
What I know for sure is the state, as part of the Extending Learning Opportunities Program, which is we'll call it a sibling of Universal Pre-K, if you'll follow the metaphor. It's a related and well-timed program. They are acknowledging that for many families, the idea of bringing a child to school for a few hours, a partial day, and then finding a way to get them home and find care for them is going to challenge families. I think that's especially magnified in Southern California, where our traffic on the freeways and others prohibits some of that. I'll just drop by, although we are fortunate in Glendora that we have so many local people who are being served in our schools. So that said, right now there are enhancements and expectations that will come along with some accountabilities. It is early enough, however, in the policy landscape that we don't know what the first and second year reporting will look like beyond what licensing is going to expect of Mrs. Gallo with her expertise in terms of county licensing. So I anticipate the answer will be yes, and there will be, beyond just the seed money for planning, that there will be some additional accountabilities in that regard.
and last question.
May I just, I want to go along with that real quick. So will there be a sliding scale of pay? Because these families who can't afford preschool, if there's the extended learning, all day, daycare essentially, will they have to pay? Or will there be, as I say, a sliding scale depending on income?
So I heard Dr. De Leon speak wisely about the wider needs that the state is working to respond to, and Ms. Vakar as well with the local control and accountability plan. Would either of you want to speak to that?
In terms of?
What we're seeing in the shift of the statewide funding formula
Yes.
because of the impact of the economy.
Yes, so two pieces of legislation that are actually in the Appropriations Committee right now that are going to be affected, that are going to give us more money. So facilities, yes, that is a piece that is a non-negotiable, that if there's a mandate, it must be funded. And so that's been heard loud and clear. And that's being put, hopefully, we're asking for it to be put in the base. We don't know, but we're assuming that's where that's going to happen. But two new pieces of related legislation that I think are really important that just made it to appropriations, which means they will likely be funded and approved. AB 70, sponsored by our own Blanca Rubio. AB 70 would require mandatory kindergarten for every child. That will also increase our enrollment. Right now, kindergarten is not mandatory. That's another piece. The primary or priority state initiative in the state of California for the Department of Education and the Superintendent of Public Instruction is that every child will read by the end of grade 3. They believe that another linchpin of that plan is that we have to have every child in school in kindergarten. Currently, kindergarten is optional. That is a very, very, any teacher will tell you, a first grade teacher will tell you that the academic abilities of their kids coming in when they've had kindergarten or not is significant. So that's a big piece that will come with funding as well. That will increase our enrollment in our school district as well, and we'll need facilities for that. So we're asking them for that as well. And then the second piece, I think, which is exactly related to what you were talking about, and I hope I'm answering this correctly, is Senate Bill 1973, sponsored by Long Beach.
Oh,
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell or O'Connell? O'Connell. Is the, he is asking, and this one's also in appropriations, and he is asking for, what was it? Oh, full-day kindergarten in every district for every kindergarten classroom. We believe that's going to be extended down to TK at a certain point, and so with that comes the ADA and the monies to be able to pay the staff for those hours. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I don't think we would be charging parents for TK or the after.
It was in regards to the
after-school
school program.
daycare.
I can answer that question.
Okay, that.
So-
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure what you were.
Yeah, so at this time, I don't think they've really given us an answer as to how the after-school care would be funded. Currently, they really don't fund it unless we've got some supplemental grants that help us augment some things. I think it's one that we're going to watch very closely. Two things will happen. Parents that are home right now with their children, they may be able to come and work for us for a few hours. Therefore, they might be able to go off and afford perhaps some of the preschool. And we have needs for part-time workers, especially for our noon duty time, for working with our classroom aides that are, 3 to 4 hours. That would be really helpful to be able to have some parents come in and be able to help us, and their littles would have some childcare because they would be in one of the TK or kindergarten type programs that would be there. So do we know exactly what that looks like? We don't. I would guess that there might be a sliding scale that would come in. I think they're going to realize that some parents aren't going to be able to afford it. Again, it'll probably be based on what our district's supplemental and concentrations are, unless it goes towards a base funding piece to be able to help fund aftercare, childcare. So I think your question was around childcare, right, as to how we're going to do that. I think it's when we have to closely go off and watch, and we haven't seen enough legislation to address the childcare issue for families that can't afford it. It might need it. But I would say that we're probably more affordable than private childcare for families that are having to make a decision which way they would go. I would think we're still probably a more affordable option.
And of course, if they go to full day, the more hours they put in the day that's at school, then the less for the daycare. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess that was the point I was
Yeah,
making.
that made sense too on that end of it.
Ms. Ward, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I think it's kind of roundabout got answered, but I just wanted to make the comment that I've spoken with a first grade teacher who said this year was challenging for them with the kids not having kindergarten. And one of the reasons, 2 or 3 or more reasons, where they didn't know how to line up, they didn't know how to walk in, they didn't know sitting, how to sit and get along with people around them. So we just take kindergarten so much for granted that things happen, and they do. But this year's first grade teachers really had to do spend a lot of time doing the basics before they could even get to curriculum. So that, I just wanted to share that so that maybe the public would understand. And then my question too about facilities for these TK, pre-K, are they going to can we just enclose the whole school, or do we have to enclose just their areas? Is there any guidance on that? Because I know at Williams we had to do some extra fencing that didn't kind of go over so well.
Thank you. So I can tell you as a general rule, and that you can trust is happening frequently, the licensing folks from the county visit our preschool and other campus programs where our youngest children are served, and see to it that we are meeting all of the guidelines to remain compliant. So in fact, our visit occurred 2 weeks ago. Ms. Gallo is not only an expert in the Tiny Tartans program and arena, she has run in previous organizations. She has run a state-funded preschool, which is part of what I heard Mrs. Merkley asking about. And she is very familiar with the guidelines of federally funded programs, including Head Start. So in the event that the state shifts in the direction that you heard Dr. De Leon and Ms. Vicar wisely describe, Our team has someone I would consider a leader in this aspect of education who can help guide us there. She calls after the compliance visits and makes sure that I am apprised. She reaches out to our maintenance and operations department and makes sure that they're aware. And within 16 hours of receiving the compliance report, I had a copy on my desk. So I think our communication is what will guide us through when there are other changes that we need to respond to.
And could you just explain what what a mandate is and then an unfunded mandate? Yes, Mrs. Vickar,
Sure,
whatever you want. Yeah.
either way, please, Ms. Vickar, go ahead.
Yeah, so a funded mandate means that there's actually funding that comes from the state to help us meet those compliances. An unfunded mandate says you have to do it, but there's no extra money that comes with it. In many districts, transportation tends to be in that category, where a lot of districts had a stagnant dollar amount of transportation funds, probably for the last 30 years, that has never changed. And yet, that $300,000 for some districts have actually exceeded over millions of dollars in many districts for them to be able to provide transportation. Again, kind of an unfunded element of what you see there.
Special education.
Special education's another one. Again, you have to provide the services, but you may not have received enough funding to be able to cover the cost of those services.
And the
Therefore,
mandate means it's mandatory.
Yes,
Because we
we
seem to
must.
have a problem understanding that. So,
yes,
And I think one other point is, like you said earlier, I just want to emphasize this, the funding may or may not come in a timely manner. So it's up to the district to front it all from their current funds. Is that a correct statement?
is a correct statement.
Which is why you put monies aside wisely in the budget, understanding that we have to do things before we get the money.
And we've also been looking at those facilities that we currently have that we could possibly leverage at the lowest cost possible to still be able to make sure that we can serve our families.
okay, well, most of my questions have been answered, but I do have one. So for this upcoming school year, if the child turns 5 by this coming February, they can start the TK this year.
Correct, in August of 2022.
Okay, so if there's room and we have students born in March, would you take them if there's room? Just wondering.
I would tell you this. I rely on the expertise of our TK teachers, their knowledge of child development, which is part of the requirements of their credentialing, and the principals who know their schools and their population really well. So we have a strong commitment in that regard to involve the team that will be working with the child day in, day out to help guide that decision. In some of our programs, whether or not a child is potty trained plays a key role in the decisions. And as we go forward looking at providing services for younger and younger children, it's important to mention that developmental milestone. So I want our parents and families out there to know that we will listen and we will consider their request beyond the mandated guidelines and engage with the professionals who will be working with their child to make the best decision we can, or to connect them with whatever other opportunities that we may know about if we cannot serve them at a particular time.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Kelson.
you,
Appreciate
everyone.
that. Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Kelson.
okay, so moving on, we need to, can we approve the Glendora Unified School District Local Control and Accountability Plan for the 2022-23, let's do it that way, school year. They can be accessed for review on the website. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Rickshon moved.
Second.
And Ms. Borg seconded. Do we need to talk about this? You presented last time, right? So we're all good? We have any questions, any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed, okay? That passed, good. Then, 3.2, approve the 2021-2022 estimated actuals and the final budget for the 2022-2023 school year. And the full budget report can also be accessed online. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Reuter.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Board. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay. Then, approve the expanded learning opportunities program plan to be implemented by the Tiny Tartans preschool and daycare program for the 2022-2023 school year. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Board.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Reuter. Are there any questions or comments? I think we've done a fairly good job.
There's a presentation.
Yeah, let's call on Dr. Carlson again.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking that was it, but was that not it?
It could,
Do you want to present again?
I would just simply say, if I may briefly from here, that the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program will provide additional extended day enriching the learning of our students, both after school, potentially also on weekends, and in our, what you would call right now, our summer camp program. So this is another wonderful opportunity for all children to participate in these enriching opportunities. And I have to take a moment to commend our fiscal services team in seeing to it that we are well prepared to go ahead and implement this program.
Thank you. Mrs. Reuter.
So I guess I do want to just make a clarifying point. When we're talking about a student coming in for TK, PK, K, this extended learning opportunities is after that school day would be done, correct? And then, just to clarify, is there a cost associated with this expanded learning opportunities plan?
Good question.
For the consumer?
Sure. At this time, our families who are participating are paying.
Okay.
However, these are seed monies to allow us to expand what we are doing starting with the next school year. So we had a fairly short turnaround time. We have written a plan that complies with all components of the state guidelines, and we're absolutely thrilled to be able to look at some innovative, cutting-edge, creative opportunities for children in terms of exact specifics, where it will be held, all of those types of things. We have existing programs on each of our elementary campuses at this time. They have looked different for the past 2 years because of COVID in terms of the number of children we could serve. So once we get some of those, once we get to return to the good old days, if you will, of those expectations and really look at how many children we can serve, then I will be more effectively able to answer those specific questions.
The attachment on the board agenda, board docs, or what the system here was quite thorough, actually. Thank you for all of the information that talked even as much as the daily schedule and how it was all broken down, et cetera. Is that information anywhere other than attached to the board docs agenda? Like, can that be on the presentation portion of the website? Because it's actually quite a thorough document, maybe 10 pages, about what this Extended Learning Opportunities program will look like.
We certainly can make it available. We realize every year about this time that our Tiny Tartans programs are some well-kept secrets, and we want to help get the word out more and more about those. So you have my commitment that we will work with Ms. Gallo to make sure that we're promoting those programs and what they can be for students who don't already know about them.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey.
I have a question. I'd like clarification. This is not just for Tiny Tartans in preschool, because all of the paperwork says it's TK through 6. So I wanted to be very, very clear that this is for extended learning opportunities, weekends, after school for any elementary age child. So it's not specific to only the Tiny Tartans, is that correct?
Right, and thank you for that, Dr. De Leon. We have, I was a child who had to go to daycare through 7th grade, and it was tough for me. I was like, but I'm not a preschool student. I had working parents. And I really appreciate, as a human being, you mentioning that too. So Ms. Gallo has run our extended day program forever, and you are absolutely correct. One does not have to be a preschooler to qualify. In fact, we have had students at our middle schools who are participating in the extended day program.
I just want to make sure that it's clear for the entire community that this could extend to extended learning programs for up to middle school students, elementary students, and maybe include students who aren't necessarily just I don't want to say just, but in daycare, but these could be students who need extra assistance, support, or enrichment after school program, in an after school program, or a weekend program, et cetera, right? So it's not limited. I want to make sure that people understand that it's not limited to only students who attend childcare or Tiny Tartans. It could be used for programs, and our wonderful teachers have so many great ideas all the time about things that they want to do with students for support, and I want to make sure it's understood that these funds could be used for any of those programs and not limited to daycare. But after school and weekends. And summers. And summers and summer camps and those kinds of things. It could also be used for winter break interim camps and things like that. A lot of school districts do winter break camps and and those kinds of things. And so I just wanted people to be well aware that there are going to be many opportunities for students through these programs and not limited to daycare. So, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I can't remember. Ms. Borg, did you make the motion? I did. And Ms. Ruder, you said maybe some.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it should be amended though, the title though, just so.
Oh, the amended on, so I need to remake the motion. Do you want to word
Wait,
it for me?
why do we need to?
Because it says Tiny Tartans Preschool and Daycare.
I think it should say TK6.
Okay.
Okay. So let me restate my motion. I move to approve the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Plan to be implemented by the K-6 program.
TK6.
TK, or even PK6.
PK6 program.
For the 2022,
It could be PK8, right?
No, it's
PK6 for the 22-23 school year.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Great. Okay.
President Merkley, not that I had a vote in this, but I just wanted to be able to share with you that this grant is really an important one for our district because it is going to be an annual grant that we will be able to access and will help us expand those learning opportunities for students. So it's not just a one-time grant.
So do we already have the grant? And how much is the grant?
600 and something?
I thought it was 661.
Okay.
687.
Thank you for
school
sharing that
year.
it was a grant. I mean,
Yeah.
this is another feather in our cap because,
It's an application grant that comes from the department. So every school district is eligible for these funds.
Great.
based
You
on who our
apply and you have a good program.
great.
Yep.
Oh,
I
Yay,
just wanna
yay
make
for all of you being on top of that.
I just wanted you to be aware that this is something you'll see, and it may have different changes from our legislature as they continue to fund this.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Dr.
saying that.
Kelson, for making this
Thank-
happen too.
And thank you for writing the grant with your team, Dr. Kelson. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, now we need to approve the local indicators for dashboard as part of the California Department of Education policy. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Reuter, and second by Dr. Rukshan. Dr. Fernando, whatever. Okay, sorry. Are any questions?
I do actually, not so much a question, but these indicators are sometimes a little misleading to people as far as what the numbers represent. And they're not a comparison to other districts, rather progress internally. And so when you're looking at the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s this way, or the green, I feel like the colors are reversed, or there's something that's just not quite right. So when looking at that dashboard and looking at those indicators, they are internal Glendora-only indicators, not as a comparison to anybody else, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it just can be a little confusing.
Ourselves
That's
and we're
right.
there with our own indicators and what we decide are the priorities as a district.
And we get those grades, we give those grades to ourselves, or somebody else gives us those grades?
Ourselves.
That's right. So
Well,
It
we
depends
look at
on the
our
indicator.
data, what the data is, if it's survey data, if it's looking at where we are in the implementation of a textbook adoption, it's looking at where we are with compliance with materials and how many we have and how far we have to go. It's all of those pieces, and
Yes.
we do a deep dive to figure out where we are, which is why you don't see us giving ourselves fives, because we know we have a ways to go on some
yeah,
things,
for
right?
example, I noticed that our, what's the new science standard called?
Next generation.
Next generation science
standards.
standard. We have scored ourselves a 2 in that process on many of those indicators. And I just, again, the report that is attached to the board presentation this evening is very concise, but thorough in explaining what those numbers mean and how it relates, and then maybe a short little paragraph as far as context is concerned. So again, I would encourage that document be made available, not just on the board document system that we have, because it's interesting information, frankly, and helps people understand where we are in our continuum, not compared to anywhere else. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, anything else, anybody? Okay, so we have a motion by Mrs. Reuter, second by Dr. Fernando, to approve the dashboard. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, good, motion passed. We may consider the agenda consent items as a whole or as individual divisions. May I have a motion to approve the consent items, 5.1 through 6.2? And educational service, all of them.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Board, for the motion, and Dr. Fernando for the second. Are there any questions or any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. I think that's it. I think we're done. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Reuter.
Second.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay, I think it was Dr. Fernando. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are out at, I think that says 5:54.
Wow. End of July, July 25th is our next meeting.
Oh, so next Monday's canceled.
Correct, we consolidated.